I read 134 books last year, and these are the best of the best, the 10 that I'm still thinking about today. If you're new, hello, I'm Beth. I like to talk about books and their cover designs. And if you've been here before, welcome back. I'm so glad to still be talking about books with you in another year. First, I have 2 honorable mentions that I felt were worth your attention. The first one is Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. Honorable mention for Bestie Questie. This is book 2 in the Farseer trilogy, which is the first trilogy in the wide sweeping series of the Realm of the Elderlings. I've only been reading this series for a year, and it feels like a lifetime. You really get to know the characters, you care about what they care about, the world building, the fantasy politics, all of it is just so good. I understand why so many people love this series, and I'm still really enjoying my time with it. I'm currently in the Tawny Man trilogy. I'm reading the book Fool's Fate, and I plan on continuing on from there to the Rain Wild. This book just really proves the point that it's not necessarily the aim of the quest that matters. It's the friends that you meet along the way, the allies that you build, and what you learn from them. I think what really managed to leave a strong impression with me from this particular book is just how much it raised the stakes and how the frustrations of our main character Fitz were both addressed and they were acted out, but then it was also changed. There was just a lot of character development that I saw in our main character in this particular book. Although the first book is probably my favorite, I did read that one at the end of 2022, so it doesn't make sense in this list. The next honorable mention is one that I don't own, but I would highly recommend that you give a read of Remarkably Bright Creatures. What I really loved about this one is how we have themes of found family. This is a literary fiction where we are following the main character of Tova, and Tova works the night shift at the local aquarium where she finds an unexpected friendship in a Great Pacific octopus named Marcellus. And Tova is really grappling with several griefs in her life, a long-term one and a recent one, and she's wondering what's the best place for her. Does her life have to stay the way it is, or should it be changing? She doesn't know what's next for her. So she might be able to find the answers to some of the things that have been troubling her the longest from this unexpected source. And I really love the way that this story is told. I like the way that the characters communicate to one another and how everything ties together in the end. It's very short, it's very sweet, and I highly recommend Remarkably Bright Creatures. For very much the same reason, the Shady Hollow mystery series really struck the cozy chord for me this past year, and I have read all the way up to Twilight Falls, which I am saving for a rainy day because I just love this series. The books are very short, but I just really like the setting and the vibes. If you're feeling a hangover from the Thursday Murder Club being on pause while Richard Osman writes some other things, definitely give Shady Hollow a try. This one I particularly liked because of the mystery at the center of the story and the way that our main character Vera is able to sleuth out the answers. It's set in a small town that has a bookshop and a coffee shop, and you kind of get to know a smaller cast of characters, and I think that's what makes books more cozy. It just gives you more time to get acquainted to where you are, and you get to stay there while the circumstances change. Coming in at number 9, I have Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. This is a fantasy story that's told through a very smart academic vocabulary because main character Emily is a Cambridge professor who is doing her studies on the different species of fairy. Emily travels to the remote village of Lojislan with her big dog Shadow to study the specific species of fairies that are known in that region. She's there to fill in some gaps on her comprehensive thesis of the Fae. Lojislan, while populated with people who could be named after IKEA products, feels an awful lot like Iceland and its language and its fierce winters. Emily is not prepared for the harshness of the environment or the coldness of the people that she meets there, but she's also too stubborn to try to insert herself or depend upon the kindness of strangers. The people that she is among now are wary of the Fae for a good reason. At night, there's the sound of mysterious bells that enchants people away from their warm beds and through hidden doors into fairy realms. And at least one changeling has been brought back as a replacement for a human child, while others were returned as empty husks of their former selves. Enter Emily's colleague, Wendell. Wendell is Emily's peer in the academic world. He's a vain and irritating rival who becomes a catalyst for Emily to accept hospitality, and he pokes at Emily's introverted tendencies, and there just might be some deeper reasons that he cares. So as Emily begins to understand the knowledge of the townspeople and their plight with the Fae, her academic project becomes more than just research. It becomes a mission to remedy what is plaguing them, to find an answer to their cursed existence. If you like fantasy, if you like lore, if you like strong female characters, definitely give this one a read. Coming in at number 8, I have What You Can See From Here by Mariana Lakey. This one is translated from the original German. It has similar vibes to Remarkably Bright Creatures. It also reminds me vaguely of The Monk and the Robot with some of the philosophical questions that it poses. Altogether feels like a Wes Anderson movie. Like, I could easily see this adapted into a Wes Anderson movie because we have a cast of really quirky characters living in a small area, really visual things about this book that I think would make great props. I can dream that this would be a Wes Anderson movie, right? The book opens when an older woman named Selma has a dream about an okapi. This is apparently a bad omen in their village. It is a harbinger of death. On hearing about her dream, everyone in the town thinks that they're the one who is going to die, and they begin to do a lot of the things that they had put off. For most of the story, we are alternating following Louise, who is Selma's 10-year-old granddaughter, and an old family friend who's known only as the optician. Amongst the flurry of last day pursuits, we have Louise's mother, who's impulsively trying to decide whether to end her marriage to Louise's father. The optician is grappling with whether he should declare his love for Selma, and Louise is just caught in the middle of it all. She's observing everything. She's trying to see if there's anything she can do to change the fates of the people around her. But when death finally does arrive on the scene, it's a door that no one saw opening. This story has themes of grief, first love, late love, unrequited love. If you like a book that has a lot of lines that you'll like to highlight and a very character-based rather than plot-based book, that's why this is book number 8 for me. Coming in at number 7, I have Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I read this just shortly after it came out. If you're a fan of The Princess Bride, like me, you're really gonna love this one. It's got a lot of great Easter eggs. What if Buttercup were the protagonist of the story? What if she set off to save Wesley? This is a story that's set in the Cosmere, which is Brandon Sanderson's sweeping universe of all things fantasy. It was my first Sanderson book, period, so I would say you don't need the additional context of having read other books by him to pick this one up, and that's what I love about the Secret Project novels. Main character Tress is pretty contented with her lot in life. She likes to make tea, she enjoys baking. She has a routine, she has a developing love interest. She has no real reason to want to leave the rock. But when her best friend, said boy that she likes, Charlie, is taken off across the sea for a betrothal to someone else, Tress undertakes a dangerous voyage to recover her friend. Along the way, she makes new friends and new enemies, and she learns more about the mysteries of the seas in her world. What makes this sea unique is that it is made up of spores, and they are activated by water, so if they come into contact with water, they kind of grow, expand, and take over, which can be very fatal for water-based creatures like people. As she learns more about her world, she gets closer to recovering her friend. Tress finds that she really has everything she needs in order to save the day. It's the world building, I think, that I really fell in love with. Having read the first book of the Mistborn series, the witty dialogue is a little bit more exclusive, I would say, to the Secret Projects. And I decided to get this beautiful Dragonsteel edition because I loved it so much. Number 6 is Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. I love Frederick Bachman. I have read the entire Beartown trilogy. That was my first experience with his work. At the very beginning of this book, a failed bank robber bursts into an open house for an apartment, and the result is that 8 anxious strangers become very closely acquainted with one another. This book might feel like a locker room mystery, and at times you will be guessing what is going on. You're trying to uncover the identity of this unmasked bank robber, but it also just turns out to be the perfect setting for them to get all their baggage out. They get to kind of vent their individual fears, which really have nothing to do with the situation that they're currently in, and they get advice, and there are changes that are made during this weird situation. This book is just precious. It made me cry on vacation. I laughed out loud, I teared up. I think there's something here for you, whatever you're anxious about. You're going to find an open concept, apartment-sized space to deal with some of those fears, and I think you're gonna come away encouraged. So this is a fun one, anxious people. Next, I have a book that when I was a teenager, I would have loved to have read. That is What the River Knows by Isabel Ibáñez. I loved learning everything I could about ancient Egypt when I was a teen, and this book would have been right up my alley. This book reminds me of the feeling of an action-packed adventure movie like Indiana Jones or The Mummy. It's a little spicier than I thought it was going to be romantically, and Inez is just a protagonist that you can root for. Her decision making is relatable. She doesn't just do what is expected of her. It's just fun. It's a character that you want to go on an adventure with. But even when she is bucking convention or rebelling against the expectations for herself, there's still a bit of like a framework of, oh, this isn't normal for this historical time period, and I think that's what makes this work. The research that Isabel put into this to write about Egyptian culture, it shows in the historical details, even the fictionalized ones, because we do have some magical realism in here. There are magical items. It's like a fantasy, romance, historical fiction hybrid, and this is the first book that I've read in a while that had a legitimate cliffhanger, so I'm looking forward to reading the next one. Book number 4, Karenina. This is the biggest accomplishment of my reading year. I have an issue with people overhyping the difficulty level of some classics. It just scares other readers away from them. And I want to tell you, you can read this book. If you want to read Karenina and you're not scared away by a slightly dramatic plot, there are not going to be like shockingly big words that make you stop and look them up in the dictionary. You don't necessarily need to have a whole lot of historical context to enjoy this novel. There's so many other reasons why you should read this book, and in fact I made a whole video just about that, so you know, if you're still thinking about it, you should watch that. I also like a story where we have someone who maybe they got away with something. This is not that type of story. This is a classic in which it is a moral tale, but we do still have more insight into like the human feelings of every character. Even if we don't agree with their actions, we can see their motivations clearly. I put it as number 4 on the best books that I read of last year. All right, we're down to our last 3. You might already be able to tell what they are from the stack over here. This last one is the very last book that I read last year, and it honestly probably belongs beside this one, because it's Divine Rivals. And if you didn't know, Rebecca Ross and Isabel Ibáñez are like bookish besties in real life. They dedicated these books to each other, which is just so cute. Divine Rivals is basically if you took the movie You've Got Mail with Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks, my favorite, and you put it in a blender with some Greek-ish mythology and magical items. That's kind of what you would come away with. Gods that are at war and people that have united under each god, so there are 2 forces who are in conflict. Our 2 main characters are Iris and Roman, and they begin as rivals at the same newspaper. They're both up for a promotion and they're competing for that one role, and they kind of dislike each other, but they're also a little bit attracted to each other. Their paths diverge, and what reconnects them is a magical item, a magical typewriter. Again, if you know the plot of You've Got Mail, you will see this one coming, but they're writing to one another, and they don't know it's the other person, and then, you know, she doesn't know it's him, and he decides not to reveal himself, but he knows it's her. They fall in love during wartime, and they're sent off to the field as war correspondents. I just really enjoyed my time with this. It was a really great book to read at the end of the year to just make you feel like reading more in 2024. I did read Ruthless Vows. Book 2 actually has a lower rating for me than this one. This one is 5 stars. Ruthless Vows is 4 stars. I had some issues with it, but this one for me really felt like the culmination of a lot of things that I had been appreciating about books last year, and it was just the perfect one to end my reading year with. Book number 2 is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence, an explosive story. We're following 2 perspectives. A young girl named Elvira who has been stolen away from her home in the desert and taken to this large city that houses a mysterious library. The man named Ivar, who for as long as he could remember has been trying to find a way out of said library. He's been trapped inside the library with his siblings and looking for a way out for most of his life. Elvira is recognized for her uncommon knowledge and bravery, and she is trained to be one of the youths that run the library to fetch tomes from its distant rooms. Elvira and Ivar's paths cross unexpectedly through both time and space, and they're confronted with a shocking reality of what's actually going on, not just inside the library, but outside in the political and cultural landscape, and they have to decide for themselves, is this knowledge worth the cost of their lives to protect? I love the setting of this book. The library really feels massive and unexplored, yet our 2 main characters felt very real, and I was really connected to their plight. Also, the main twist of the story managed to surprise me. Lately, I feel like I can kind of see plots coming miles away, but this one had a really great twist, and that twist actually threw the entire story in a new light, and you could honestly finish this book, start back over at page 1, and you could read the whole story with a new perspective if you wanted to. I plan on doing a light reread before reading book 2 this year, and as you can see, I have many tabs because I did really enjoy this one. It had a lot of great lines, and also some of my tabs are just like plot related, like what is happening? The Book That Wouldn't Burn is number 2. My number 1 book, which hopefully didn't come as too much of a shock, The Will of the Many by James Islington. This was probably the most edge of my seat reading experience that I've had in a long while. This is a fantasy novel that's set in a kind of futuristic Roman society. We're following the main character of Viz, who has been offered an escape from his life as a part-time prison guard and full-time orphan in exchange for his services as a spy. If Viz agrees, he will be adopted and sponsored by this wealthy man named Telemus. He needs a capable young person to advance to the levels of this mysterious school that claims to be preparing its privileged students for roles in society, like high leadership roles in religion, military, and the Senate. But for the few students that graduate, even fewer make it out alive. We follow Viz to this boarding school setting where students are being trained for those roles, but from early on, Viz suspects hidden motives. He suspects that the rigorous training and study that these students have to undergo is to advance the government, the hierarchy's priorities. He's also closely guarding a secret of his own, and it's one that could make him this hierarchy's greatest threat. My favorite elements of this book were the politics that are at play, alongside the futuristic and fantasy elements. We've got fight scenes, we've got training montages, side quests, discovery locations, even conversations where there's tension and subterfuge at play, where Viz has to get everything exactly right, or he could lose everything. So the stakes are high, and the twist ending for this one also really left me edge of my seat. So yes, my number 1 book of 2023 is The Will of the Many by James Islington. I'd love to know if there are any matches on your pile. What was your top read of last year? I always appreciate your book recommendations. I hope you're doing well this new year. I hope you have a really great TBR ahead of you, and I look forward to seeing you in another video soon. I've got some fun ones on the way. Be sure to like and subscribe if you plan to stick around for those, and I will see you in another video soon.